Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hi, and welcome to the New Warehouse Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Lawton. And on this week's episode, we have a guest from the company SpotSee. Our guest is Jan van Niekerk. Jan comes to us. He is the VP of Engineering and Innovation at SpotSee. And he's going to tell us a little bit about himself. And then he's also going to tell us about SpotSee and what they do. But SpotSee is a technology-based company that provides a solution for indicating when products are moved throughout your warehouse or throughout the transportation system, and it's an indicator without having to look into the packaging or inside of the contents of the box, that allows you to know when there's been some kind of tampering or damage. So, and Jan's going to explain a little bit more and talk to us about how that works. So, Jan, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hi, Kevin. Thank you. It's an honor to be on the New Warehouse Podcast.
Oh, I'm very happy to have you. And you're joining us from Texas, but I guess originally you said you're from the Dutch region, right?
Yes, I was born and educated in South Africa, but moved to the U.S., many decades ago. So all my kids are true blue Americans.
Ah, okay. All right. Sounds good. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first? Tell us about how you got into the industry and kind of how you ended up at SpotSee and your position now.
Yes, I've basically been in the semiconductor and electronics industry my entire life, which is the core reason why I ended up in the U.S., being born in South Africa.
Okay.
But have worked for, several of the large semiconductor manufacturers and also did consulting for almost a decade with kind of a lot of emphasis on radio frequency, which included RFID. So I helped SpotSee develop one of their IoT products, Internet of Things products called SpotBot, which, detects damage on transported goods, and then uses the cellular network to immediately communicate the extent of the damage and the time and the location to a cloud-based service that our customers use. So I did that as a consultant, and then, as a result of that, got very excited about the SpotSee vision. Okay. And joined SpotSee just over 2 years ago as the VP of Engineering and Innovation.
All right. Very interesting. Very interesting. So why don't you tell us a little bit about SpotSee then? You mentioned one of the products and kind of what they do, but why don't you give us a little more in depth of exactly kind of the, I guess, full product line and kind of the technology that they're working with?
Absolutely. Yeah, SpotSee is actually very well known in the supply chain business because we make a bunch of what you could think of as really low-cost labels, such as a tilt indicator, which, fairly low-cost, $1 type of device that is, stuck to the side of a box. And then if you tip the box over, then the tilt indicator, shows that it's been tipped over, and so that the recipient can take resultant action. And in fact, a couple of months ago, we got a big hit, a lot of hits on our website, and we couldn't understand why. We noticed that our tilt indicator had a very lively discussion up on Reddit, which was, at least interesting to us. But anyway, we shipped this type of product to, 6,000 customers all over the world on a regular basis, literally by the container full. So a very popular product. And basically, just as our name says, these products spot damage, and they help our customers to see that damage, in a convenient place when it arrives, at its destination. And then for our more high-end products, such as our SpotBot and ShockLock products, we use, telecommunication systems such as, the cellular network, as well as satellite tracking for our more advanced products to immediately communicate, damage events so that, the concerned parties typically get an email or an SMS on their cell phone to say, hey, that expensive $10 million transformer has just been dropped on, somewhere between Rio de Janeiro and Bogota. So literally, from the $1 damage indicator to, thousands of dollars satellite-based damage indicators. But they all do the same thing, Kevin. They spot damage when the customer's not there and, then take that news to a convenient place where it can be seen and it can be dealt with.
Interesting, and very important too, I think. So tell us about a little, I guess, about the technology. So how does the $1 tag is a visual indicator, I guess, that you would get upon arrival, correct? And then versus the couple $1,000 that you talked about, the SpotBot. Now that's more something that's going to send you an immediate alert. So how does the technology work on that, and how does it differ, I guess, between the different products?
Yes, certainly. And of course, it's all got to do with the communication, the convenience, and ultimately, the cost of the product. And, we would love to, make a $1 tag that communicates to you via the cellular network. But, the cost of electronics and the battery is simply not there at the moment. Hopefully maybe in the future, I believe it will become possible at some point in time that we have super low cost devices. But typically now, electronic devices start somewhere in the $10 to $100 range if you want something like cellular connectivity. So the really low-end devices have no connectivity at all.
Okay.
So, let's say there's a little red flag, or in the case of our temperature indicators, there's a window that changes color when a certain temperature is exceeded or underseeded, I guess, depending if you have a warm or a cold indicator. And then when the package arrives, this is typically stuck right next to the bill of lading. And then bill of lading instructions can even typically include mark the status of the indicator, as you receive it. Or, some of our products say inspect if red. Yeah. So there's a little vial with ink in it. It's held in place. If a certain shock level is exceeded, which we carefully calibrate, the ink bleeds out, makes a red dot. And then what the customer, the recipient, sees when he receives the package is this package has to be inspected because there's a red warning. And, several of, our users, that's a function on their bill says, mark the status of the indicator.
Interesting.
So very simple. It's a visual indicator, and, it's got a little red flag. So, Kevin, our challenge was that even though that's very cool, it's got too much of a human factor in it. It's got to be inspected.
Right.
It's kind of discretionary even if the guy sees it, if he's the guy that dropped the package, he's not going to be really too excited to fill in on the form that, the indicator was actually triggered.
Right.
So we and our customers understood that there is a need to make this more automated. But we were challenged by the fact that, a radio link would just make up for too expensive a tag.
Okay.
And that's how we finally got to RFID. Because, RFID is the one type of radio technology where you can literally get to a tag that costs, below $1.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that is done is that even though the tag is actually a radio, it does not contain any battery whatsoever, which has a bunch of disadvantages. The one disadvantage is that a lot of the radio energy is being used to power up the electronic circuitry that actually does the communication.
Mm-hmm.
So it's limited in range to roughly the width of a dock door. And that's an important, image to have in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why the width of the dock door is important is you want to be 100% sure that, when a forklift drives out of a truck, at a warehouse, that standard 10-foot dock door, is something that an RFID system can reliably cover.
Okay.
And that is exactly how modern day RFID systems and antennas and readers are designed, is to give you a really high reliability on the read rate of items coming in and out of a truck on a forklift,
Mm-hmm.
In a typical warehouse.
Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. So it sounds like the small little thing has a lot of technology just inside of it. So definitely interesting to hear. And I think the visual indicator and then also obviously the alert too is a big deal. And like you said, looking at that, most things now, I mean, when you look at automation and everything that's going into supply chain and operations and warehousing and transportation, you're trying to take that human element out of there because the human element is really, where you're still pretty much error prone. So I like that you guys looked at that and then kind of changed the approach a little bit and started using the RFID. So now you mentioned that you guys have about 6,000 customers, correct?
Yes. I mean, a lot of customers that ship goods, all over the world are, either directly through our indirectly through our distributors, mm-hmm. or directly to us, part of a whole ecosystem of companies that we help to reduce damage in their supply chain.
Okay. And what typical industries are using them? I mean, 6,000 customers is a lot, so I'm sure you're covering a lot of different industries, but where are you really seeing popularity?
A lot of people, a lot of supply chain people are familiar with, Uline, which is a large distributor.
Oh, yeah.
We're in the Uline catalog. We're on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can go buy our products literally, off the internet today.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, a lot of, you will literally, in the supply chain as goods move, you will see our products on the side of a box. You will see the tilt indicator. You will see the shock indicator.
Mm-hmm.
Our temperature tags are used by, several of the large pharmaceutical companies to protect, to provide low-cost thermal indication if something like medication, is transported out of the, allowed temperature supply or constraint.
Interesting. So what would you say, I guess, to somebody that's listening and they're not utilizing this technology right now? What kind of factors in their supply chain would you say would really indicate that they need to get a product like yours?
We'll be back after a quick break. You hear a lot about supply chains these days because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
I mean, since we talk to, thousands of customers all over the world, we have a pretty good handle on shipping damage. And I can tell you that, of all goods shipped in the world, about 2% of that get damaged. So, Kevin, we're literally talking trillions of dollars of damage.
Okay.
And so the question, if you boil that down in the end to, the single package that, a warehouse manager is concerned about today is, what can I do to make sure that this package does not get damaged, or even the more general question, how can I in general assure that my damage gets reduced? Because, sometimes it's unavoidable, but because accidents happen, we're human, factors that we don't have control over. But in general, Kevin, what we see is that typical 2% of damage gets significantly reduced just by putting our indicator on the side of a box. And it's kind of the human factor, right? So if a handler notices that there is a damage spotting device, so in other words, that the company responsible for the shipment has eyes where they did not previously have eyes, right? Then their behavior changes. So instead of throwing the box would be more carefully handled because those eyes inside the supply chain is going to tell what actually happened. So what we typically see is immediately as we put these onto, or as our customers put these onto shipments, they literally see an immediate reduction in the damage, simply because it affects human behavior.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's a good point because, you do put out a good point there. It's like an extra set of eyes. So now people are, I guess, more wary and more careful as well. And I think you also probably eliminate, because maybe sometimes, you have somebody driving along in the warehouse, accidentally bump into a pallet, a box, and before, maybe they don't say anything, right? But now I'm sure when you bump into it, it's going to have the indicator, right? So you kind of guilt them, I guess, a little bit into wanting to say something and call it out or do the right thing in a sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, the point is, it just gives you verifiability, right? So now you can essentially verify that, goods are intact, or actually verify that goods are actually have been damaged. So it gives you essentially a chain of responsibility.
Yeah, definitely.
And for instance, if you think about, items that cannot be tilted, and, we actually have a huge, business in Europe because for some reason, hot water heaters there contain a little oil pump that has oil in it, which if you tip the box over, then the oil runs out and the unit has to go back to the manufacturer. So it's got a this side, instead of just sticking on a this side up sticker, it's got one of our Tilt Watch XTR stickers on it, which is, a fancy sticker with a tilt indicator on it. So it says this side up, but in addition to that, there's an indicator. So who wants to tip that box over, right? Because from that point onwards,
right,
there's a red flag that says, hey, this was tipped over. So when that gets to the receiving point, the customer is, going to note that, And, once again, now you have, a chain of custody that you can, pass on the responsibility as the thing moves through the supply chain.
Definitely. I think that's an important point too that you bring up about, the customer service aspect, because now the customer has an indicator as well. But in a lot of cases, you will get product to you that you'll never open the box right before you ship it. It comes in packaged, and then it's one unit in the box, and you put it on the shelf, pick it, and then ship it to the customer. So you don't know if something happened on the inbound side in between transportation from manufacturer to distribution. So the box may look normal, but inside maybe something got jostled around because it got dropped by accident, but there was no real visible damage. So the indicator really does give it that look and, that heads up to take a look at that extra box or that product that may have some kind of issue. So I think that's a good thing that you bring up, definitely.
Yeah, Kevin, you're absolutely right. I was literally in a customer's distribution center a couple of weeks ago. They've been testing a bunch of our, low-end indicators. They were making a product, and I'm not going to say what it is because then you probably know who I'm talking about.
Okay.
But anyway, that product, a beautiful product that we see in almost every office today. And we dropped it 6 inches, and we dropped something like 20 of these, several $100 products. And then they all looked fine. And then when we opened them up, oh my goodness, they were wrecked inside. And
wow.
The engineers, from the customer, that they're looking at each other and at us and going, how would we know this? And we're just smiling because we're looking at the red indicators on the side of the box and like,
it tells you.
QED, we're done here. This is so easy because the indicators just told the story. Just a beautiful example of, exactly as you said, from the outside looks intact because, we can't afford, companies can't afford to put enough packaging around the product to protect it against all kinds of damage. So, there's a trade-off between the cost of packaging and the cost of damages. But what this does is, now you have reduced packaging because you have to keep, shipping costs reasonable. But you can reduce the damages by just, putting an indicator on. Or if there is damage, at least you spot it before it ends up with the customer. You spot it, at the earliest point in the chain where the damage actually happens. And what that typically does in the end is, if that happens enough, our products point to the source of damage. And I'll give you another example. We're using our SpotBot, which is kind of a fancier unit, costing a few $100s. But what that guy does is, let's say you have a truck and it goes over a bump that damages whatever is inside there. In this case, it was windscreens for an automotive customer. The unit reports the position as well as the magnitude of the acceleration that caused the event.
Okay.
And in this case, after they saw 10 shipments of that got damaged, they started looking at the position data, and it all shows the same point. And then they actually went to that point and saw that it was a railroad track where the rails was exposed. And as the trucks drove over these rails, they got this huge, 43G bump that damaged all the windshields inside the truck. So railroad company fixed that, problem gone. And, thousands of dollars and, delays in the factory, etc., all eliminated by fixing, a railroad track. That's kind of, the exciting stories that we hear from our customers when you have eyes in the supply chain that previously just was not there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because a lot of times, the trucker shows up and there's damage. They pull the door open and you ask the trucker what happened, and the trucker's like, I don't know. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really awesome. I like that. And that story is like a perfect example of, why something like this is so beneficial. Because I know a lot of people are like, oh, why do we need, excessive tracking and this and that? But that points exactly to why, because you can root cause so much easier and figure out how to fix. It's like a simple solution, right? It's just, next time have the delivery go a different route away from the railroad tracks, or like you said, fix the railroad tracks, right? So,
correct.
So that's really great, definitely. So you guys have a new product, correct? The Shockwatch RFID. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. So I kind of started on that story, and then we went over. But I think in general it all ties together. Mm. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to build a low-cost radio, a below $1 cost radio for us, that we could put on, smaller packages that do the same, but, do not cost $300 for a unit that, talks via the cellular network. So we had to come up with a low-cost radio and a UHF, which stands for ultra-high frequency, which is essentially the pervasive RFID technology that you would see at any large, distribution center when trucks pull up, the doors open up, the forklifts run in and out. And you'll notice in many of those, there are two panel antennas on each side of the dock door.
Okay.
And there's a reader with lights flashing as the forklifts drive in and out. And that is essentially an ISO standard RFID tag that is affixed to the boxes that go in and out, or the articles that go in and out the truck door. And that's also known as electronic product code, or EPC, generation 2 RFID. It's the ubiquitous ultra high frequency RFID that's used. And, that's supplied by, companies like Alien and Impinj to the supply chain world. So what we did was we used one of those off-the-shelf RFID chips, and we simply incorporated it into, our low-end shock monitor device, which, is called Shockwatch.
Okay. Right.
So by simply replacing, the plastic back of our existing Shockwatch device with a little printed circuit board containing an RFID chip and some cleverly designed contacts, we were able to detect that movement of the red flag that signals damage in an optical way. We were able to convert that mechanical status to an electrical status, so that as that tag or indicator moved through the dock doors at an RFID choke point, if the red indicator was showing that damage over a certain threshold has actually occurred, it was possible to read the electronic product code of that device and or the tag identification of that device, plus a flag saying, hey, damage occurred.
Okay.
And so, a very simple step for an existing RFID user to read an extra memory location in the tag, which contains the status of the damage. And I mean, that's literally what it is.
Yeah.
So, it's a simple low-end tag, but it's now bundled with, a standard EPC Gen 2 RFID chip that can not only report the electronic product code,
right,
but also reports the damage status of, the package.
Interesting. Kind of get the best of both worlds of using the RFID to kind of locate your product inside as it gets checked in, and then you also have that damage indicator, which takes it a step further. So I think it's a really, really smart product.
Correct. Yeah. So the disadvantages is that right at the point where the damage occurs is not necessarily when you have that, in view of the RFID.
Right.
So we could load the indicator on a truck, at a certain point, it goes through the dock doors with an RFID reader. Yeah. The truck stops somewhere in the middle. The driver takes the box out, kicks it over the truck, and puts it back. The damage occurs there.
Okay.
The RFID is off at that point. But as soon as it gets to the next RFID choke point, as soon as the truck pulls up at the next set of dock doors,
yeah,
and the forklift runs in with the product, that reader picks it up. So the disadvantage is that unlike some of our products that right at the point where the damage occurs, it will immediately
give the alert,
use a cell phone and phone home and say at GPS locations this and this at this time the damage occurs. Because of the low cost of this product, the RFID is the only way to turn the silicon on. So at the next choke point, when it goes through the RFID antennas, the chip turns on, it reads the status of the damage indicator, and then reports it. So it's an appropriate technology for the application. You obviously still have the red flag, the physical indicator as well, and to a lot of our customers, it's very important because they typically have a flow where a product would go from their factory and then to a third-party, trucking company to, let's say, one of their distribution centers where it becomes, their property again. And then typically from there to, let's say, an installer. And then it changes hands again from, the transportation company that took it from distribution center to the installer, and then the installer moves it to, wherever it's going to be installed. So you find that the product changed hands, 5 to 10 times before it actually gets to where it's being installed or being used.
Right.
So there's lots of potential for different parties to damage it, but not all of them have RFID. So let's say maybe the first 5 or 6 points, in the supply chain has RFID, but then from that point onwards, it moves, to a more low end, maybe a local installer that gets 2 or 3 of these. He's not going to buy, an RFID reader to go read those,
right.
But he can still look at the tag and so say it's red or it's not.
Okay. Yeah.
So
it's
the fact that you have the bundle of the mechanical indicators plus the RFID is, important and valuable.
Definitely. Really interesting and smart product. I think it's really smart how you combine both, and it kind of caters to both, like you said, the people that have RFID and the people that don't. So you still have that visibility all the way through, or it may be different degrees. You still have some indicator and some kind of visibility to damage. So really interesting stuff. So if people want to find out more about SpotSee and purchase some of your products, how do they go about that?
I'd say, step one is take a look at our website, which is, www.spotsee.io. We're not a .com, we're a .io, which, currently is more trendy. But, kind of the association of input and output or Internet of Things is, why we did that. But www.spotsee.io, there's a whole, website made by, Jill, our marketing lady, describing all these products literally up, as I say, from the $1 indicator up to, the multi-thousands of indicators that are used by, space agencies to monitor the transfer of, rocket motors. Okay. So, I'd say the website is a good start, and, we're, a lot of our product, is on Amazon and, Uline and several other distributors as well.
Okay, great. So very accessible. So we'll definitely put all that information on thenewwarehouse.com so people can find it. Jan, thank you so much for coming on the show, and interested to see how SpotSee continues to grow and bring smart products to the industry.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.